BB back for chapter 12 of my book, Flowerantha. BB wanted to read the book today, right? Wanted to read some of the chapter?
Yeah.
Cool. So who do we have for a special guest today, BB?
We have Scales.
Scales? And Scales is a merkitty?
Merkitty, yes.
All right, well, let's join BB and Scales for chapter 12 of Flowerantha.
Nash grabbed Bushrell's forearm and brought him in for a hug, taking Bushrell by surprise. Thanks for taking care of it for us. Bushrell backed away and tried to fight a smile, but his lips betrayed him. You did pretty well yourself. That monster knight looked quite banged up before I got to him. Its wings were still tied together. Mash chuckled and slapped Bushrell on the back. I guess I did, all right. Yes, you did. And you were right. We should stick together. I'm so glad you're back. Mei Lin gazed at him in
admiration.
I had to finish what I started. I wanted to. What is the plan? They filled him in on the progress of searching the fountains. You will be happy to know that I still have all 3 wishes. Mash, Beverly, and Mei Lin jumped and cheered. I wish that the sand and bugs, said Beverly, and the bugs would disappear from the fountain. At Bushrell's word, the sand and rat insects vanished with a pop. Then the tub of the fountain filled again. The water spilled down from the top tier to the middle and splashed into the basin. So how do we do this? Asked Beverly.
Thanks, BB. She'll take over again at the end. Where did we leave off? So how do we do this? Asked Beverly. I'll try. Mash stepped over the edge of the fountain and into the water. Letting the water from the top tier fall over his head, he closed his eyes. The other 3 waited. Perhaps it will not work for you, said Bushrell. Mash opened one of his eyes. What do you mean? No one from Flowerantha has ever gone to the Amaranth. Mash lifted a finger. That we know of. Bushrell shook his head. Let Beverly try. Mash put out his hand and Beverly took it, holding down her dress as she stepped into the basin with him. This is kind of cold, she said. Mash, get out. Bushrell pointed his thumb over his shoulder, and Mash climbed out and folded his arms. Nothing happened. The water dripped onto Beverly's face, and she brushed her wet bangs aside. I'm still here. This must not be the right one. On to the next. Bushrell held out his hand and helped Beverly climb back out. She shivered. The 4 of them took off back down the hall. They climbed over the deceased monster knight and came to a fork in the passageway. Beverly hesitated and then darted down the hallway on the right. Is this the right way? Asked Bushrell. I have no idea, but they kept running. She stopped. No, this doesn't look familiar at all. Sorry. The boys sighed, and they all spun on their heels and bolted back down the other path. At the end of the next hallway, there was still no fountain. I swear this is where it was. They looked doubtful. I swear. Wait, I think she's right, said Mei Lin. Thank you, Mei Lin. Look. Mei Lin bent down and touched the floor. Mash and Bushrell knelt down next to her. On the floor was a bronze pipe, surrounded by a circle a couple shades darker than the rest of the floor. The spot on the floor was damp to the touch. Beverly shuffled her feet. Sand, too. Bushrell stood, balled up his fists, and slammed them against the wall. It has to be this one, said Mash. Why else would they go through the trouble of moving it? And where did it go? Malin snapped her fingers. Bushrell, do you still have that mirror thing Mash gave you? He stared at her without answering. The looking glass thing that we used to know where you were. Yes, I think so. He patted the bamboo of his shorts and pulled out the small glass disc. He put it over his eye and saw his own face as they were seeing him. Could we use it to see where the fountain is? Like, re-wish it? It's worth a try. I wish to see the location of the fountain that used to be located here, Bushrell said, as he held the glass up to his eye. It is dark wherever it is. I do not recognize the location. Can I see? Bushrell surrendered the glass to Mash. Wait, this cannot be it. I think I know where it is. You both should recognize this place. Beverly took the glass next. No way. Malin held it up to her eye last. Is that where I think it is? The room was dark, but dim streams of light revealed some telling details in the room. A metal structure that was dented stood doubled over on one side of the room. On one side was a table with straps on it. The fountain butted right up against the table, pushing it against the wall so that the table stood only on two of its legs. Well, I'll give it to them. It is the last place we would think to look, said Mash. What is it? Asked Bushrell. It's the room we were just in when the monster knight was trying to get us, said Beverly. After you. Mash swept his arm in front of himself, and Beverly moved first. On second thought, he said, blocking her path, maybe I should lead. You got us lost last time you led. Beverly gave him a shove. Back down the previous hallway, they stopped when they neared the door in question. The falling monster knight body had been removed, but now there was something else guarding the door. Tumsky, you rascal! Mash ground his fist into his other hand. We need to get into that room, and no tricks this time. Ah, Cerulean, Mr. Mash. Bevy, friends of Mr. Mash and Bevy. The creature nodded at each of them. His voice bounced like a ball and ricocheted off of the stone surrounding them. Mash advanced toward Tumsky, towering over him. Are you going to let us pass? Tumsky held up his three-fingered palm facing them. Stay where you are. Unabashed, Mash ran his finger along the doorframe. What is this room used for anyway? Punishment. Tumsky stuck out his tongue whenever he paused. But I is a lousy tour guide, you know, Mr. Mash. I tried to keep you away from the castle, but you found her. Get back where you came from, won't you? If that's the punishment room, what were those metal balls used for? Asked Beverly. Stretching the body parts. Tumsky's giant eyes did not blink as he waited for a reaction from them. Beverly gulped and put her fist over her lips, and Malin shuddered. Tumsky, I don't want to have to do this to you. Mash made eye contact with Bushrell, and they both reacted at the same time. They lunged at Tumsky, but before they reached him, Tumsky flicked his wrist and sent the boys flying back toward the wall. They slammed their backs and fell to the hard floor in a heap. Tumsky clasped his tiny hands together. You leaving this place yet? Bushrell growled. Not a chance. I wish for 2 swords. 4, said Mash. The girls are plenty capable of defending themselves, too. Bushrell eyed Malin as a sword materialized in each of his hands. He tossed the second sword to Mash. Exactly as I taught you now. I don't need a weapon. With his hands still clasped, Tumsky's feet left the ground, and he hovered in the air just above Mash's and Bushrell's head. Scorso, the monster knight in charge, he give me protection from being hunted if I keep everyone away from this here fountain. You see, Mr. Mash, we are a delicacy to the monster knights. But we be more valuable living than dead. Not the case for you, my friends. At least not the boys. The visitor girls, though. Tumsky held his hand out toward Malin and Beverly. You will not touch them. Bushrell swung his sword at Tumsky's throat. The sword turned to sand, and it poured down over Bushrell's still clenched fists. Beverly grabbed a handful of the berries on Malin's back and pulled her closer to the wall, behind them. Tumsky sank back to the ground. I make a deal. Visitor girls, for whatever you wants. No deal, said Bushrell. He shook the sand from his hands and put his fists up instead. Bribery and favors be the only way to get by me now. Mash's sword was still drawn, and his muscles were flexed and ready to fight, but he didn't move. What else do you want? Asked Bushrell. Mash's cool gray eyes went wild. Are you really going to bargain with him? He just tried to barter with Beverly and Mei Lin. He's a trickster. He's fooled me once. I don't want to have anything to do with him. I surprised you two to be working together. Tumsky drummed his tiny green fingers against each other, but the boys didn't react. You don't know? Tumsky's stuck-out tongue taunted them as they frowned back at him. Tumsky gestured to Bushroll. Well, well, you a baby soldier, yeah? He didn't wait for Bushroll to respond. Your uncle, your father's brother. We on the same team, don't you know? He was working for the Monster Knights, too. No, that cannot be true. Bushroll sprang at him at the same time as Mash did. Mash raised his right arm to attack from above, but the hilt struck Bushroll hard on the chin. Bushroll reeled and stumbled backward, losing his balance. Tumsky didn't flinch as Bushroll fell to the floor with a howl of pain. I'm not done, said Tumsky. Mash dragged the sword across the floor in one hand while he reached for Bushroll with the other. Bushroll smacked his hand away and cradled his chin. Your uncle's working for Scorso, just like I am. He was on a mission to the home of Mr. Mash here. He swung his hand in Mash's direction. Mash paled and his jaw went slack. Ah, Mr. Mash, you want to tell him? Mash was shaking. He dropped the sword and it clattered against the stone floor. Bushroll, I didn't know. Bushroll tore his eyes away from Tumsky to look at Mash. His eyebrows knitted in anger and confusion. His chin already bore a dark purple bruise. Go ahead, Mr. Mash. Mash was silent, his face frozen in horror. Fine, I tell him. Your friend, Mr. Mash here, he was responsible for the death of your uncle.
What?
Bushroll stared at Tumsky for a second, letting the news wash over him. He then gritted his teeth and turned on Mash. Bushroll leapt off the floor and slammed into Mash, causing Mash to tumble to the floor in a heap. Bushroll stood over him, and Tumsky watched in silence with his tongue sticking out. Tumsky let Bushroll land one punch right to Mash's temple while the girl shouted at him to stop, before Tumsky waved his hand and tossed Bushroll off of Mash. Like I say, neither of you is valuable alive. I would have made a deal with you, but since you don't give what I be wanting, I gotta make sure you don't try to get to this fountain, and give you a taste of what will happen if you try again. Good luck getting home, girls. With that, Tumsky circled his hand in front of his body, and the boys were thrown into the punishment room. Mash's knee met the hard stone fountain, and he yelped in pain. The door slammed behind him, and a lock latched. The screams of Beverly and Mei Lin sounded muffled and further away than just beyond the door. Without touching him, Tumsky flung Bushroll to the wall with the broken shelf, and a chain wrapped itself around his body to secure him against the structure. Mr. Mash, I sorry for this. Tumsky wrung his hands out and pointed to the table. Mash flew like a rag doll onto the leaning table. In moments, Mash's arms were tied down with scratchy rope that hurt his skin, and beads of sweat formed on his forehead.
Beverly, get Nautica, he whispered to no one. A bright light shone in his eyes, but he couldn't tell what the source of the light was. He could just make out the silhouette of Tumsky. His small hands held some kind of tool. Tumsky clapped the metal tool onto Mash's eyebrow. Earlobe. And Mash's whole body jumped at the pressure with his stubby fingers on Mash's forehead. Tumsky held Mash's head still. Tumsky reached across the table and grabbed a handful of small metal balls. The metal clicked together each time Tumsky took one of the balls out of his hand, and Mash felt more weight pulling down on his earlobe. He tried to move his hands to relieve the pressure on his ear, but the rope dug welts into his arm. Tumsky added ball after ball onto the end of the tool. As tears sprung to Mash's eyes, when he couldn't take it anymore, he cried out, "Stop! You're going to rip my ear off!" Tumsky grunted. He retrieved a piece of fabric from his jacket. A bucket wadded?
Piece of fabric from his jacket pocket. Wadded
it up and swallowed it.
Whoa, what?
And shoved it in Mash's mouth. The fabric tasted salty, like sweat, but Mash tried to convince himself it was seawater, and as he gagged, tears stung in his eyes and left a wet trail down the sides of his face. Tumsky disappeared from view, and Mash was left with the bright light blinding him once again. He twisted his head to see where Tumsky went, but it only made his ear hurt even more. He squeezed his eyes shut and sobbed, waiting for it to end. Maybe 10 minutes or maybe an hour later. Mash couldn't be sure. Tumsky appeared again, blocking the light. He unbound the ropes, released the weights from Mash's earlobe, and flicked his wrist. Mash flew across the room and collapsed. Chains formed around him where the ropes were and shackled him in place. He sagged against the nearest wall, cupping his trembling hand against his ear. Tumsky replaced him with Bushrell on the punishment table, straining against the chains restraints. Mash touched his left ear, the lobe of which was now slightly longer than the right one. He closed his eyes when Bushrell grunted. Bushrell refused to cry out like Mash had. Mash pressed his heels of his hands over his ears. The door to the room burst open and slammed against the metal shelf that Mash was attached to, which jammed the bent metal to his shoulder blade. Time to go to the mountains, said a man's voice.
Thanks, Phoebe.
That's scary.
Yes, it is getting a little scary and intense.
Oh my gosh. I almost cried there.
I know. Yes, it got a little scary and intense. So,
why, Mom? Why?
So, well, that's
you could
called
have made
suspense.
it happy.
It will be happy.
Yeah, but you could have made it happy right now.
It's
I don't want to have nightmares.
It's going to get happier. Hopefully you won't have nightmares. Thanks for listening to Chapter 12, and I hope you're not too scared.